All right, so we were talking about lighting, and one of the students had a idea of setting up lights that would actually switch on, and I came up with this so that you could actually get these going on. I was just messing around with some of the features of it. So once again, this is all hardware rendering, and this is basically it's a little, it's not super complicated. It's just a little bit of a pain, but since it's the main part of your visual and it gets this nice lighting in here, I think it'll actually work out pretty well. So how did we get that? So the first thing I had to do, let me just go to 5 so we can see here. And you know what? I will just I created a polygon sphere, moved it right here. So phase 1, I make the sphere, which is going to be represent the light bulb itself, the globe. This is just a visual cue, the ones like the one that you actually had. And inside of its settings, I go in and I want to tell it not to cast shadows, because you may decide, depending on how you have it set up, that the lights are casting shadows, and if they're inside of a sphere, when this point light is casting a shadow, it's the same thing as taking an actual flashlight and sticking it in a shoebox and closing it. You're not going to see the light because it's being blocked. So we're telling this sphere, we're unchecking. So we go in the attribute editor, under the sphere name, render stats, and we uncheck cast shadows. You may want to uncheck receive shadows just depending on how your setup is, but definitely we don't want to cast shadows. That's the first thing. So that's with this little mesh. Okay. Next, I'm going to create a point light. So a little flash. So here's my point light. Gonna bring that over here. Oops, no, it's a little too far. I'm not going to put on the inside yet. Not just yet. And so I'm in mode 5. If I press mode 6, that would be any textures I would have. And mode 7 is the actual lighting. See, so here's my point light. Now, if we look at the settings of the point light that I have over here, we can see I've made some changes to it. Oops. And one of them is I have a decay on it, and I'm going to show you why. So let me deselect. So I have this light set up. I go to mode 7, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here it is here. And we could see it's coming out really far, right? What you may want, you'll notice it's blending out a lot, but these guys are a lot hotter in that area, and that gives us a much better effect. So what I would do is the decay rates, when I turn these on, if I go to quadratic, then I have to crank up the brightness. And then I can get this effective brightness that's there, which makes a nice effect when it's going to be inside of that sphere. See that? So it's really hot right here, but the lighting drops off, and that's what the decay rate is. The decay rate is essentially that it is fading away from the light source at a calculated rate, linear being a much slower decay, quadratic much faster, and cubic the fastest. And every time I increase that, I'd have to increase the intensity to compensate, but I found quadratic actually works pretty well for the effect that I was trying to get, which is these guys over here, that effect. Okay. So we've got our sphere. I'm just going to pull it out for a second. We've got our light, and the value that I like is 25. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up a system that we can turn this off and on to 25. Just not in here yet, but just so you can kind of see that. Okay. And I also, if I hold down spacebar, so anytime I try that, hold down spacebar, left mouse click above the hotbox menu. So when if I click it over here, it'll be up here. If I click it over here, it'll be up here between these two lines. I'm holding down the spacebar, and I left mouse click and go to Hypershade render perspective, which is it's at basically what would be 2 o'clock. Just click on that. Boom. And that gives me this. These are all of the different things that are in my scene. This is my Hypershade. I got rid of a couple of things over here so I had more room. And I'm actually temporarily going to get rid of my, let me pull this over so I don't see my outliner as much. Okay, it gives me a little more room in here. And we'll be doing eventually a hardware 2.0 render, which will give us that nice look so we can see how fast. That looks pretty good just from that effect. That's the end result we're going for. Okay. Now, there's a few ways we could do this, but right now, I'm gonna make one more thing, because for this to work, we need 3 major components. We need the sphere, we need the point light, and we need the material that is going to actually show the lighting effect on this guy. So I'm just going to create that material, right click, create materials, and I'm just going to use a Lambert. There's really no need at this point in what I'm doing for it to be shiny or anything, because it's either going to be, it really depends on what your look is supposed to be, but right now it's either off or it's on. And yes, it would be technically more of a glass in most cases, that you would see, but a shiny glass, but we don't really need it unless you're going to do real super close-ups with it off and see shine and possible reflections. In that case, then you would choose either a Fong or a blend so you can have the shininess, and have reflections and things, and that might be cool, but I'm just going to go with this and keep it simple. One less thing to worry about. And so Lambert 7, we can see I've been experimenting, trying to solve your problem. And right here, we have this, so I'm just going to go in, and I'm going to call this one Light Mat 1 for Light Material 1, and press Enter. Now is a good time to do a little save. Save scene as. But if it cops out on me, I can always go back in, and that'll be nice. So I've got my material, I've got my material, my sphere, and my point light. And that's what I need to get started.